Hello, and welcome to Horns for Dilemma, the podcast of the Texas National Security Review, TNSR. I'm Doyle Hodges, Executive Editor of TNSR. In this week's episode of Horns, we listen into a discussion held in February between Professor Paul Pope of the Intelligence Studies Project at the University of Texas, Austin, and General Retired Robert Neller, former Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps and a Distinguished National Security Fellow of the Clements Center at the University of Texas, Austin. Neller provides a tour de horizon, taking us through the Indo-Pacific region, as well as world events that led to the United States' current position relative to China and other competitors. He then outlines the challenges facing a service as it must choose how to recapitalize or replenish its forces after a lengthy war, while at the same time reimagining and re-equipping itself in order to be ready to fight a very different type of war against a near-peer competitor. This is a fascinating glimpse from the mind of someone who served in this seat and presents a sympathetic, off-the-cuff, and entertaining view of what it's like to make the difficult choices leading one of America's premier military services and trying to prepare for any contingency. This discussion was held at the University of Texas, Austin. Let's listen in.
Sir, we're really glad to have you. I was just saying thank you to General Neller. It's very kind of him to do this, and I know there's a great deal of interest in both among faculty and interested public and our students. And so it's great to have you here with somebody with your experience. I just want to start with, there's a tremendous interest in what's going on in the Indo-Pacific right now, and more specifically the Marines. And you and I were just talking, the Marines have a long association with the Pacific. They've been there for a long time. They've had a mission to go do things there for a long time. But I don't remember very many times when a services shift in doctrine and force structure and things has attracted more kind of attention and public debate. I do remember sometimes back in the 80s in airland battle and things like that. So kind of helping us understand that is what we were hoping to do this evening. We have a diverse audience. There's some with a military background, some veterans, some active duty, and then we have some civilians. So we'll try to explain any acronyms or anything that we use to them. But if you could help us just with things like the threat analysis in the region and the strategic approach that's driving these changes, that would be great.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's a big subject. I was in Hawaii doing something else with another opportunity I had. Plus, I did something at Marine Corps Base at Kaneohe, and the senior Marine out there is a guy named Bill Journey. I knew Bill Journey when he was a captain. Now he's the 3-star out there. So we had dinner, and he had just got back from the Philippines. And you may have seen in the paper, the Philippines have allowed the U.S. military to come back into 4 different bases and installations with some level of opportunity to train. Not a base. Saying a base is a bad thing because it's a sovereignty issue, and we always want to respect the sovereignty as we would. It's this international law of a foreign partner. But the United States used to have major installations on the Philippines. We had Clark Air Force Base up by Manila. We had Subic Bay Naval Base. One of the first places I went as a junior officer was to Subic, and we trained in the Zambales and did different training over there. All those base agreements were ended in the 90s for political reasons, but also for some acrimony about the behavior of Americans in those countries. But as Professor Pope said, the Marine Corps, we have a long history. And it doesn't start with World War II. It goes back to the Boxer Rebellion in China. Marines were part of the foreign legation that defended the international compound there against the Boxers. We were on Mindanao with the Army during the Huck Rebellion. Former President Duterte always used to have as a backdrop pictures of U.S. soldiers standing on piles of Filipinos that they had shot and killed. I mean, that was not photoshopped, okay? So, but the Philippines was a territory of the United States after the Spanish-American War. It was a territory all the way through till after World War II when they were granted their independence. Just like Hawaii was a territory. And so the Marine Corps has a long history of presence of forces being deployed. And obviously the largest was in World War II. There were over 400,000 Marines. There were no Marines that fought per se in the European theater. And if you even look at our history, other than World War I, very, very, very seldom were we engaged in combat with Europeans. I can't explain it. You can draw whatever conclusions you want from that. If you ever watched Coppola's The Pacific, which is kind of the Marine version of Band of Brothers. So I remember when the two main characters are Robert Leckie, who wrote Helmet for My Pillow and Strong Men Armed, and then a guy named E.B. Sledge, who wrote With the Old Breed. He was a guy who ended up becoming a biology professor later on. And when Leckie comes home to New Jersey, the cab driver picks him up, a soldier, and he's in his Marine uniform, and he won't let him pay because he served in Europe and I got to go to Paris. You were on Guadalcanal. You didn't get to see shit except death. And so if you're ever home and you have to binge something, it's pretty graphic, but I think it's pretty realistic. And it's a great story, but the two main characters are those two individuals who ended up becoming fairly noted authors. So the World War II, I thought about this when I was on Hawaii, one of the few places in the U.S. that have actually been attacked by a foreign power. We had a dinner out on the USS Missouri, and we drove by the Arizona. Anybody been to Pearl and seen the Arizona? Anybody? You guys need to get out more. If you do have a chance to go to Hawaii on vacation or whatever, I would encourage you to go see that because, it's a simple story. 07 or so on a Sunday morning, the 7th of December, Japanese Imperial Navy dive bombers and torpedo bombers attacked the U.S. fleet and sunk 8 battleships, all parked in a row on a Sunday morning. Everybody's asleep. The Arizona, for whatever reason, didn't sink in the mud like most of them. It capsized, and many, many of those sailors are interred inside that ship today. And so it's, could it happen again? I don't know. And that's kind of what the discussion is about the future of the Marine Corps. Future organization, not the future of the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, just like the rest of the U.S. military, we look at threats. And we've looked at the Pacific for a long time. At the end of World War I, like most militaries do, there are growing learning organizations, and I think, all of us, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marine Corps, we all pride ourselves on being that type of organization. The war was over, and as democracies always do, war's over, let everybody get out, we're going to go back and make money, we're going to have a good time, party's on, don't bother me with the military, they don't need any money. World War I was the war to end all wars, right? That was what it was called. The war to end all wars. And then you have a bunch of autocratic people come up out of the ashes, Tojo in Japan, Hitler in Germany, and Mussolini in Italy. Sound familiar? They're populist, but they're not. They're authoritarians. And so the Marine Corps started looking at the Pacific. A famous guy in Marine Corps lore is a Major Earl Pete Ellis. He traveled through the Pacific. He's kind of like Amelia Earhart. He died somewhere out there. Nobody ever figured out where it was. But he traveled all these islands that eventually the Marine Corps and the Navy went back to in the war. And he did a study, and he developed an idea of landing from the sea to seize and secure these islands. Then the Marine Corps started writing doctrine, and the doctrine, there was a big discussion about it, probably a lot of controversy like there is now, but it became the amphibious doctrine, which allowed U.S. forces, Army and Marine Corps and the Navy, to project power from the sea. So this is not new. History it doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So that's kind of what's going on now. So what is it that drove all this? I came in the Marine Corps in 1975 at the end of Vietnam. We had signed a peace treaty with the Vietnamese, and they reneged on the peace treaty, and they invaded South Vietnam, and they overwhelmed the South Vietnamese military, and we had to do a rather hectic evacuation from Saigon. Sound familiar? And we brought a number of Vietnamese, maybe somebody in here whose parents came here. And we settled them in camps all over the country, and we eventually got them repatriated with a local area. Church groups sponsored them, people sponsored them, they went places, they got jobs, they raised their families, and they became American. Just like most of our families, we all came from somewhere. Unless you're a Native American Indian or your family has a history of you came here as a slave, all our families came from somewhere else. And I like to remind people of that. There are not many Native Americans. But that's what this country's built on. We're built on immigrants. All of us. So then we were at war, Cold War with the Soviet Union. And then the wall came down. Reagan had a big buildup. Gorbachev decided it was over. And then the Soviet Union became Russia and became a basket case. We had a short war in the Middle East when Iraq invaded Kuwait. And then it's just like after World War I. It's peace, right? No war. Peace dividend, President Bush called it right before he lost the election. That was his reward, kind of like Churchill's reward for winning World War II. As soon as the war was over, they kicked him out. So there's no peer. I mean, it's the United States. It's a unipolar world. I remember in the late 90s, where we had people in Ukraine helping them remove their nuclear weapons under the proviso that if anything happened when they got rid of their nukes, that we'd come back and help. That was the quid pro quo. I don't know if that's written down anywhere, but that was the understanding. Well, then 9/11 happens and the world changes, right? I don't know where you were. I don't even know if you were even born. I know where I was. I'm sure he knows, Paul knows where he was. And for 20 years we fought, Islamic insurgents or Taliban, whatever you want to call them. And we did that to the best of our ability, and your military, not my military, it's our military, was totally focused on that. But it was evident to most of us, at least it was evident to me, that the Chinese were growing back their country. I mean, economically, they became a powerhouse. They're still an economic powerhouse. We transferred a lot of business over there. Anybody ever read Pillsbury's book, 100-Year Marathon? The West thought if we introduced capitalism into this country, then Western liberal ideals would follow. That was the concept of operation. But it wasn't working. And there was all sorts of cyber and espionage, and I will tell you, without breaking any level of classification, we knew what was happening. We sat there and watched it. And they took the money that they earned from they're hardworking people. They're not foolish. They worked their tails off. And they built this incredibly sophisticated society of economies and industry. And they built a military. It was very capable. They reorganized themselves. I was telling Professor Pope, I was the J3 of the Joint Staff, which means I was like the operations officer for the U.S. military. It was the greatest job I ever had, other than being commandant. Because I was not a commander. I was an operations officer. And every day, anything happened in the world, I was supposed to know about it. Anything, which some days were better than others. And I learned a lot. And if you're into that type of thing and you like being in the middle of the mix, it was like I call it being on ops crack every day. But by Friday, I was pretty much wasted. That's when I started doing Red Bull. I never drank Red Bull before that. I have to be very careful with Red Bull, because if I have a Red Bull right before a meeting, I tend to talk too fast. But I didn't want to fall asleep at a meeting with the chairman. So that was my choice, right? So I drank half a can around 2 and another one at like 4:30. I had to pace myself, because my Thursday coffee wasn't getting it. I do not recommend it. I don't know how you drink these giant monster things. I'd be climbing on the ceiling.
If I could I just interrupt to say make a comment? I was just had a class, and several people that were in the class are here, and I used the example of the J3 or the G3 of the Army as the busiest person in the world, and somebody you will never be that busy. And I was making the point that when you're writing for them or briefing them, please try to say to them, you cannot imagine. I know a little bit about that job, having supported it, and it's an unbelievably weight of responsibility.
But at the same time, you never forget that you don't know everything about everything.
Yeah.
And if you try to know everything about everything, you're going to fail. So you got to find out who knows everything about that thing and hire them. Who knows something about this? Well, it's Paul. All right, get him up here, have him teach me, or tell me what I need to know. You never. The breadth and depth is too great. So, long story short, China built this incredible capability, and we watched it happen. And we watched them build the islands in the South China Sea. We watched them try to intimidate the Filipinos. We watched them address the Vietnamese trying to drill for oil off their coast, which they think is within the 9-dash line, which is not a legal status document. I'm not an international lawyer. The Filipinos took them to international court, and based on the UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea, the Chinese were found to not be in compliance. There's only one problem. Who is not a signatory to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea? The United States. So how do you leverage somebody about the violation of a law if you're not a signatory to the law? So you can, bust their chops, and they just like, are you a signatory to that law? You're not. Next question. So I watched all this. And it didn't appear. It appeared to me that we knew it. We were witting. The intel people knew about it, but we were still focused on terrorism and Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and we were focused on the Iranians and the Iranian nuclear program. Russia was just a basket. We didn't pay attention. They had nukes. North Korea would do stuff from time to time. But we're watching China. And particularly the growth of their maritime force. There are 3 forces. There's cyber. They have 2 armies that do cyber, 4th and 5th field. Everything's People Liberation Army. You got People Liberation Army, you got People Liberation Army, Navy, you got People Liberation Army, Rocket Force. I mean, you may have seen the news today. They got more ground-based intercontinental ballistic missiles than we do. It was in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. It's all open press. Don't be distracted by a stupid balloon. Okay. There's a lot more important stuff going on, in my opinion. And so when I had the opportunity to be the Commandant of the Marine Corps, we had just published this doctrine called Expeditionary Force 21. And it was a good document. But I didn't think it focused enough out in the future, because you're trying. So the dilemma, I'm going to get up and use the board.
Yes, sir.
So the dilemma that you have as the head of a service or as a combatant commander, remember now, the service chiefs, now there are 5 of us: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Space Force. And then you have combatant commanders who are operational commanders. And there are regional combatant commands Northern Command, Southern Command, AFRICOM, EUCOM, Central Command, which is the Middle East, and Indo-Pacific. And you have functional combat commanders. You have Strategic Command, you have Special Operations Command, you have Cyber Command.
Transportation.
And you have Transportation Command. They do things. They own the forces, and the COCOMs own the force. Services don't own force. My job is to recruit, train, and equip. That's my job. And be a member of the Joint Chiefs. So here's the dilemma we've had. We've had since, militaries have always had this, but it's particularly pertinent since 9/11. You've got a current fight, because I've got soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardmen going off, mostly to CENTCOM since 9/11. And then this force I have, I've got all this gear, I've got to maintain it while I'm using it. So I got readiness issues. But then my real job is to think about what's going to happen in like 5 or 10 years. Who am I going to potentially face? And what capabilities are they going to have? And do I have those capabilities? Do I have the right equipment? Do I have the right people? Do I have the right organizational structure? So I got to worry about the future. And so some of this stuff I've got here will be good in the future, but some of it won't. And that's always been the dilemma, because to maintain all this stuff, I got to have money. I got to have money. And it's not cheap. So right now, our nation is recapitalizing the Ohio-class ballistic submarine fleet. We have 16 of them. We're going to build 12 Columbia-class submarines to replace them. Because eventually, those nuclear reactors are going to run out of trons. And the holes have been too deep, and it's not going to be safe to operate. So to buy those new submarines is going to cost us $30 billion. That's not in the budget. Oh yeah, and the Air Force wants to replace the B-2 bomber with the B-21 Raider. Oh, and by the way, the Minuteman missiles that are in the silos in North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana, or wherever the heck they are, they're all built in the 50s. They need to be replaced. Oh, by the way, you got to go to Somalia tomorrow and kill Abu, because he's just a shitbag, and he deserves to die. And the lawyer said it was okay. Because we checked. We don't kill anybody without the lawyers saying it's okay. We don't. We follow the rules. There are laws of war. And your military, we follow the rules. We mess up once in a while, but we follow the rules. Those other people, they do not. They do not. So that's the dilemma, and that's what's kind of going on in the Marine Corps. So I sat there, I looked at this thing, and I said, well, we need to review the Expeditionary Force 21, and we wrote a document called the Marine Operational Concept. And I like to write, I think I'm okay, but normally when you write something, you're like, God, that's just not very good. So whenever I write something and I read, I go, it's pretty good. I get really nervous. Because am I drinking my own Kool-Aid, right? Am I drinking my own stuff? But if you read that document, at the beginning of it, I wrote the following thing. The Marine Corps, this was 2016. The Marine Corps is currently not organized, trained, and equipped to fight a peer adversary in the year 2025. That was 7 years ago. And so we started out on a journey to try to reorganize the Marine Corps. Who was the peer adversary I was thinking about?
Pretty clear.
Well, pick one. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Or all four at the same time. If you're feeling froggy, don't recommend it. So we started on this journey. And then we were also subject to sequestration, which was the last time the debt limit was discussed, and our Congress, in an order to cut a deal, they said, okay, we're going to limit defense spending above a certain level. And in order to spend above that level, we'll have to pass a separate resolution. And sequestration finally went away, I think, in, 2019.
Something like that.
Yeah. So we're back. So we're back to square one on that. I'm not here to talk about the budget. I'm not here to criticize the Congress. They have a very hard job. They just need to figure out a way to get together and figure it out. If it were easy, they would have done it already. So what do you do with this force? So some of it, 50%, for the sake of discussion, is good for the future. I need some infantry, I need some jets, I need logistics, I need ability to drive around on a battlefield. I don't know where I'm going to fight. I don't know if it's going to be in the Pacific. I don't know if it's going to be in Africa. It could be, if I told you 4 years ago that there'd be a big fairly conventional ground fight in Ukraine, you would have gone. Even though Putin's Russia invaded Georgia and seized two places, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. He did that. He violated their sovereignty, and he took that ground because he said native ethnic Russians were living there. And the world did nothing. Nothing. What are they going to do? They didn't do anything. Go over here. Go into eastern Ukraine. Anybody do anything? I'll go to Crimea. Anybody do anything? No. China. Well, I'm going to dredge up all this sand and build me an island on this little piece of rock. Anybody do anything? Another one over here. Anybody do anything? Another one over here. Anybody do anything? No, stop doing that. Okay. I'm not judging, but that's what happened.
Are you saying, could I ask a question about that? It was my feeling during that period, you made a comment earlier and what you're talking about now, that we saw this happening and the Intel people saw it happening. And Will Inboden, who's the head of our Clement Center here, was talking in one of my classes recently and talked about how the policy community, it was kind of like bad news that we were saying this view of China was not real. And it's the expression I used to use with Admiral Keating when I was out at PACOM was, we're shooting behind the duck.
Yeah.
We were consistently shooting behind this duck. Now I think a lot of people have awakened and we're trying not to shoot behind the duck. But I have the feeling we're kind of getting a slow start. And
Well, again, I was there, so I'm responsible. Did I do enough to raise the concern, to go to the meeting? But we're a civilian-led government. Military personnel, this isn't a cop-out. We provide best military advice. And so you report it, the intel community reports it. But I think part of the problem is, and this can happen in any organization. You have an idea of what you think the outcome is going to be. You have an idea of what your policy is. And sometimes it can be very difficult when you're looking at it and you look at it and you go like, okay, this was what we said we came here to do. Are we accomplishing our mission? No. Okay, well, are we doing something wrong? Is our plan bad? Do we need to change our approach? Or is this just a complete waste of time? and then you go back. And it's difficult to, to deny yourself. So I think we weren't not watching it.
Right.
I mean, we knew the Russians were flying in the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone all the time. The Chinese were flying. But it just like when former Speaker Pelosi went to Taiwan, they did all that stuff, which was probably a rehearsal for the blockade of Taiwan. At least that's what I've read in open press. But to get back to what's happening with all the services now. So a document came out. Former General James Mattis becomes the Secretary of Defense. And people, so I'm not saying because he was a military guy. I think things had gotten to the point where economically we realized that this idea that, and it's not a bad idea, but it depends how much you let that idea become the preeminent idea. The idea that by doing business with the Chinese and developing capitalism, that over a period of time, they were going to become more liberal and Western in their view. Now, I'm not so sure that hasn't happened to their people. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, you look at Vietnam. The end of Vietnam War was not a great thing for the United States. But Vietnam is a pretty good friend right now. Even though they're communist, the government is still communist. 50% of the people in Vietnam, they were born after the end of the Vietnamese War. They have, it's ancient history to them. And like most young people, they're like, I don't have got time for that. I need a better job. I want to get an iPhone 14 Plus. I'm going to write code for a new app. So I don't know how it's going to come out. But Secretary Mattis, they wrote a National Defense Strategy 2018. And they were very inclusive. They had all the policy people writing it. They let all the military people look at it. So everybody got to touch it. I think that we had like 67 versions before it went hard and printed. So I saw it. I mean, so if you didn't like it, you couldn't say you didn't get a chance to say something about it. And basically, without getting a classification, it said three things. One, improve this. And he used a very uncivilian word, lethality, which is very General Mattis-like. I can be your best friend, I can be your worst enemy. I'll come here and we can live in peace. Don't make me kill you. Because I will. Okay. As a Marine, I understand that. So, improve the force. Second, develop alliances. The United States has a lot of outstanding alliances. NATO, SATO. There's a lot of discussion about with the Abraham Accords, which was a great, I think, maybe the most significant accomplishment of the Trump administration, to me, to get those countries. I mean, for an Israeli plane to land in Dubai, I mean, that's like crazy. And you get the Qataris. I mean, if we get the Saudis in, whew, King's X. I mean, okay, yeah, he killed Khashoggi. I got it. But I think Friedman wrote a really good article. Like, okay, we need to get over it. Don't forget it. But, we can't let that drive the whole thing. That's my opinion. And then the last thing was run a better business. These are my words. This is what, take care of the money. Spend it well. Okay. And then he went down and he looked at all the threats. Now, normally the defense strategy, they have the quad box. They talk about the 4 threats, 4+1, 2+2. And they basically said, hey, here are the 4 threats, plus terrorism, which is never going to go away. But he told everybody, he said, okay, Naval Force, Navy and Marine Corps, you focus on the PRC. Army, you are a continental force, you focus on Russia. And then everybody's going to focus on Iran, North Korea, and then SOCOM, you do terrorist stuff. But everybody's got to look at everything else. And so when I, that was going on, I said, okay, that's pretty clear. So of this force that I have, 50% of it translates. And then, so what do I have to add? What do I have to add to do what I just got told to do by the Secretary of Defense? Well, most important thing for me is I got to have a network, right? If I don't have a network, I can't fight. So I need cyber. Okay, and then the Chinese capability, they have a very, very effective long-range precision weapons. So I got to have longer, I got to be able to shoot farther. So I need long range. And I in the Pacific, there's thousands and thousands of islands, so I've got to be able to distribute my force. So I've got to look at how do I do, Marine Corps have been talking about this, called distributed operations for years. And now it's come to pass. So when he and I were growing up, we didn't know what's secure. We didn't have SIPRNet. We had like maybe 8 radios in a company. Or one vehicle had a radio. And now everybody's got a radio. And now I can push live streaming video down to a small team who's got their iPad or their tablet or their phone, and they're seeing what they're seeing on the other side of the hill. And they can call for fire, or they can put a target in there and it goes back. If I got the network. And I got to be able to defend myself against, I need air defense, missile defense. When was the last time a U.S. ground formation was attacked by an enemy airplane? World War II. So I could go on. So when he and I grew up, the Soviet Union had a very capable electronic warfare capability. So we were always conscious about turning our radios on. There's sort of the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. And they could direction find you. Now, it's even more sophisticated with satellites and all the cyber capability. So, you want to die, walk around on the battlefield with your phone. Have your phone on. They'll find you. You see a story of like a couple months ago, all those young Russian soldiers were allegedly in this barracks and they're all like FaceTiming with their moms. Did anybody tell them to turn your phone off? What? I think so. So the game has changed. So I don't think it's any different for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. Everybody's got a list of stuff they have to buy that's different. Then the question is, okay, I only got so much money. I've got this legacy force. Okay, so what do you want to get rid of to get this? Because you don't have enough money to keep everything you got and do this. What do you want to get rid of?
I think you got rid of tanks, right, sir?
The Marine Corps got rid of tanks. We had we had 1 battalion. We had 2 battalions.
7 companies, I looked.
7 companies of tanks, we had a couple hundred tanks. Had another, probably a couple hundred in the reserve. So it was the decision. We got rid of our heavy junk armor. We got rid of some artillery. We got rid of some bridging and some heavy engineering capability. We got rid of 3 infantry battalions. We got rid of some aviation units, at least the number of aircraft in those units. That's called force structure. It's people and stuff. Because if you want to have people and stuff to do this, you have to get rid of, unless you think you're going to get more money, and you're going to be able to recruit these people and train these people and get them to stay in the service, you have to give up something. And what do people want to give up? What do most organizations want to give up when they're told they have to change? They want to give up nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody wants to give up anything, right? You know, in the corporate world, we let people off. We fire them. And you're seeing that now because they're worried about the top line, they're worried about the stock price, they're worried about the money they're making. And so what's the most expensive thing in the U.S. military? People. 70% of the budget of the Marine Corps, it's a little bit less for everybody else, because the Marine Corps doesn't have a lot of huge capital investment, particularly like the Navy or the Air Force. But 70% of the budget that we got every year went to pay for people. And do I need the same people to do these jobs as I did to fight terrorists? As a cyber Marine or a missile defender Marine or a long-range precision artillery Marine cost me the same as a truck driver? No. I can have a more junior person do it. It doesn't take me as long to train them. I don't have as big of an investment. So it's cheaper. The force is becoming expensive. So is anybody on Capitol Hill going to talk about paying the military less? No. Okay? So if we all agree we've got to develop these capabilities to fight pick one off the list in the future, you got to decide what you're going to give up, and you're going to decide where you're going to find the people, and you're going to decide you're going to train them, and you're going to decide how to keep them. I remember I was at Marine Cyber Command one day. Marine Corps has a long history of Marines that have done signals intelligence and cryptology. And we have 3 radio battalions. And they do radio signal intelligence and different things. And a lot of those Marines moved into cyber. And there are a lot of people out there. I mean, I used to go, anybody, who's the hacker here? Anybody hacker? Any hackers in here? I can get you a job. Anybody write code? Math? Okay. We want you to go to a national security agency and work for General Nakasone. Or you can work for General Glavy, our General Glavy in the Marine Corps, or the Air Force. Because, back to this, if my network is up, and I have global positioning, and all my satellites are seeing what they're seeing, and all my planes are flying clean, and all my long-range precision weapons can deliver effects on target, I can win. And what do I want to do to the other person? I want to take it down. I want to destroy it. But then they can't hurt me. They can't see me. And that's as old as the Romans and the Greeks. See the battlefield to see the enemy. Except now we're doing it in space and in cyber domain. And then we're confusing everybody by our information operation by what we put out there on social media.
Sir, could I ask a question? So you've painted a really clear picture of the opportunity cost. That's my word, not yours. But
Yeah.
that you know, if you do one thing, you can't do another thing. You got a top line for money, or bottom line. You got a top line for the number of folks in your force, and you need to make hard decisions. So going from when you left to the current commandant, some tough decisions have been made by the Marine Corps. I read a quote, one critic argued that the Marine Corps custom designed for distributed operations on islands in the Western Pacific will be poorly designed and poorly trained for the LAM campaign it's most likely to fight. I don't know if I agree with that exactly, but what we're saying is we're going to accept risk somewhere. Mm-hmm. We're going to design a force for something. How do you feel the Marines have kind of come out on that in terms of capacity to both optimize for Indo-Pacific, but also grapple with other contingencies that might come up?
So the Marine Corps is taking the forces that are in the Pacific. They're creating what's called a Marine Littoral Regiment that has an infantry battalion, a missile air defense capability, a logistics capability, and we're going to tie it together, flying some unmanned aircraft that will fly to give us surveillance and reconnaissance. The rest of the Marine Corps hasn't changed that much, other than no tanks. They still have a forcible entry capability. They still have a traditional ground capability. They still have artillery. Now, if you were there, you were the commandant, or I were the commandant, would we have hedged a little bit more? Would we have maybe kept, 3 companies of tanks, or 4 companies of tanks, but only 3 tanks per company? Would we have kept a little bit more artillery? Would we have kept 14 batteries of artillery with 4 tubes as opposed to 7 with 8? Okay, but I'm not the commandant anymore. I'm an old retired guy living in Driftwood, Texas, who tomorrow is going to be 70 years old.
Tomorrow's your birthday, sir?
Tomorrow's my birthday.
Happy birthday. I'm right behind you. I'm having a big party in May.
So
we were commissioned the same year.
General Berger, I've shared with him my thoughts, and he has taken my thoughts. Okay, but he's the commandant. And the way it works in the Marine Corps is when the commandant says something, generally, everybody says, aye, aye, sir, or ma'am. Actually, I think all officers, male or female, should be called sir, but that's my opinion.
Sir, on this thing, I just would say that one thing you can't accuse either you or the current commandant of is not focusing. And I know there's a couple of people in this audience that have asked me, Army officers, and going back for the whole time I've been here, about what threat should we focus on? And I had the luxury of focusing on one threat when I was commissioned. That was operating a folded gap to defeat the first and second echelons of the Soviet attack. That's what we focused on. We got pretty damn good at it, I think. The commandant has made a decision that he is going to prioritize that focus, and I think you were focusing it a lot as well. And so as an intel guy who worries about whether the warning has been received, I'm really not worried about that with you two guys, whereas I was a few years ago. Not you, but
the
just
controversy, first of all, it is not, if you go back and read our history, I've talked to different classes since I've been affiliated with this school about civil-military relations. There have been times where senior officers, active duty and retired, have expressed contrary views to the civilian leadership. There's the big revolt of the admirals and generals after World War II. But the way I was raised is like, you're asked the civilian control of the military. You provide your best military advice. And if you don't like it, and you can't live with it, then resign. You don't go on social media and run your mouth, write a book, make all these allegations. If you want to do that, put in your resignation, become a civilian, and go write your book. That's the way you're supposed to do it.
Yes, sir.
So, none of us, I've done the same thing. Probably not. But so what do you do? The big thing, the big concern, and the Marine Corps has always been, the Army, and I'll use the Army as an example, not critical. The Army has some very specific units. They have airborne units, they have air assault units, they have armor units, they have light infantry units, they have ranger units. They got 82nd Airborne, they got 101st Air Assault. So every Marine unit has been the same. If you're in an infantry battalion, you got the same equipment. You got the same organization. You're an artillery battery, you're in a tank company, you're in a truck company. It's just, they're the same. They're all the same. And we fight and have fought we say it's in congressional language and law that we are the nation's force in readiness, ready when the nation is least ready. And we're supposed to be able to go anywhere the President of the United States says, go there, break this.
Sometimes called the 911 force.
Call the 911 force. And the concern is that because we have created different formations that are not mirror image of other formations, which the other formations are still the majority of the force, that we are overly focused on this particular threat, and we no longer have the flexibility or the ability to go fight. If I took these Marine Littoral regiments and sent them to Yukon to fight the Russians, or to Africa to fight Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram, is that true? I don't know. But it's different.
Right.
And we fight in a combined arms team, just like the Army does. But we organize, we have, unlike the Army, we have jets. We have fixed-wing aviation. We have naval aviators. We have F-35s, we got F-18s, we have heavy lift helicopters, we got medium lift helicopters, we got attack helicopters. We've got unmanned aircraft. We're going to have Predators in the Pacific. So it's not like we're not able to do anything.
Right.
And so their concern is our ability to fight in a fight like Ukraine, which is, if you studied the Ukrainian fight, it's a traditional ground fight with on top of it laid a bunch of new technological capabilities. Loitering munitions, really good use of the internet, really good use of tablets. But the big thing, the reason the Ukrainians are having such success is their soldiers are really well trained. And who trained them? U.S. Army, Special Forces, some Marines in there. And they got really good, and they're fighting to defend their families. And the Russians, I'll be the first. I had no idea how bad they were. Because all I'd been reading for years is, hey, they've turned into these 300 Brigade combat teams. They got
Right.
brand new BMPs. They got brand new tanks. They got
They got
upgraded
new doctrine.
They got new doctrine, the Gerasimov doctrine. And then you watch the YouTube videos and it's like clubbing baby seals. I mean, I'm sorry. A guy sent me a video of some Ukrainians firing Javelin, which is the U.S. provided anti-tank missile. There's a range of about 2 kilometers. It's got other particular capabilities, and they shoot it, and it goes out, and there's like half a dozen or so Russian armored vehicles in the field, and one of them goes up in smoke. And the rest of them, they just sit there. Well, then, let's shoot another one. They shoot another one. Blow it up. Vehicles sit there. Now, if that were either of us, first thing I would do, I would have shot back, and I would give an instruction for the rest of my unit to scatter, shoot their smoke grenade launchers, move into the tree line, and return fire, even inaccurately. Start shooting back.
To suppress what's
To suppress what's being shot at me. But what did they do? They did nothing. They all got killed. So what does that tell me? No leadership, no training, no situational awareness.
No NCO course.
No leadership, none. Yeah. No lieutenant, no sergeant first class, nobody, a bunch of people out there don't know how to use their gear.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know.
Sir, I want to make sure we have time for the students and other members, other folks here to ask some questions. And there's a lot that can flow out of this, your talk. But before we do, I'm going to reserve the right to ask one question, okay, which is off topic a little bit from what we've been talking about. And that is service and our need to fill out our ranks in all of the services, and what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I can't speak for the other services. I mean, you read the article, if you read, I mean, you should all be concerned as American citizens about the manning levels and the capability of the individuals serving in armed forces. So right off the top, of all of the people in the country that could qualify to serve, they've comprised less than 30% of the population. You're all in that group. You're all qualified, I think. So, but 70% of the American people that are within the age group of 18 to 30, they're not qualified. They can't pass the aptitude test. They can't pass the physical fitness standards. They can't pass. They've got something in their past. They have a legal, moral, or ethical problem. They're committed a crime, and in the past, we just don't take them because we did that after Vietnam, and I was in that. Paul was in that Army. I was in that Marine Corps, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And then Reagan became president. I remember we got 16% pay raise that first year. I'm like, oh my God. And then people started to join in, and we got all new gear. And then 9/11 happened, and it was even better because, quite frankly, a lot of you wanted to go test yourself.
Right.
War is good for recruiting. I know that's counterintuitive. People want to go do what their uncles and dads and grandpas did.
And they joined for the right reasons.
And they joined for the right reasons. They wanted to defend their country. There was a threat. So I'm concerned about it because now I'll take that 30%. It's actually less than that. How many of them want to join? The number is pretty small. And we have to go find them, and then they have to want to do it. And, so what's Amazon pay now? What's Walmart pay? Amazon offers college tuition.
And we're at full employment.
So, you ever read a book called Once an Eagle?
Yes, sir.
It's a book.
It's a great book.
It's a great book, and it's about the Army, and it's about a guy who's growing up on a farm. And I remember the beginning, he goes off, and this is before World War I. He goes and joins the Army. Or no, maybe it's after World War I.
That's before Pershing down in Mexico.
So Pershing's in Mexico. And his dad goes nuts. The only people that join the Army are criminals and derelicts and drunks. And that's kind of the United American view of an active duty peacetime Army. When the war's on, it's different. So the problem is, we need you. He and I are too old.
Still willing, though.
Still willing. They call me back, I'll go. I don't know what I would do. Maybe be a trainer or something.
I got to replace my knee first.
But I mean, I've only got 3 joints left to be replaced. I got 2 knees and a shoulder left. Everything else is through. It's good to go. So it's a problem. And you can't pay. You can raise the pay all you want. And I mean, I guess that, but I've talked to a lot of Marines, like you've talked to a lot of soldiers. Why did you join? Money very seldom is part of the equation. And I want to get a college education. I want to see the world. I want to test myself. I wanted to go somewhere. My dad was a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. My uncle, I always admired him. My high school football coach, I don't know.
I would just say, I want to open up to questions, but that period that you mentioned in the late 70s was a lot more horrible than people know, and we didn't want to talk about it because we didn't want the Soviets to attack in Europe. That's the bad news. The good news is how rapidly we turned it around, the way you're talking about. Once the society decided and the government decided and people supported it, it was a pretty amazing turnaround. It's the best, I think, kind of turnaround I've ever seen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Horns of a Dilemma, and please don't forget to visit our website at tnsr.org.